Hi, I'm Thomas Vozzo, CEO of Homeboy Industries, the largest gang rehabilitation program in the world. We're based here in California. On today's show, really what I want to talk to you about as business leaders, how by employing the most marginal people in our society, you're going to improve your company. Also going to take you through the heartbreaking story of George, our most loyal and best farmers market salesperson. And he's going to take you through some of the struggles of what society has thrown up against him, how hard it is for him to live in a straight and narrow life. It is so very eye-opening. And also going to tell you about, despite my prejudices and understandings, that these former gang members are some of the most generous, hardworking people I have yet to meet. So please enjoy the show.
Congratulations! You are tuned into Dov Baron's Leadership and Loyalty Show, the #1 podcast for Fortune 500 executives and those who are dedicated to creating a quantum leap in leadership. Your host, Dov Baron. He's an executive mentor to leaders like you, a contributing writer for Entrepreneur Magazine, CEO World, and he's been featured on CNN, Fox, CBS, and many other notable sites. Dov Baron is an international business speaker who was named by Inc. magazine as one of the top 100 leadership speakers to hire. Now, over to Dov Baron.
Welcome, dear friends, fans, and fellow aficionados of leadership excellence. Thank you for joining us on this episode of the Leadership and Loyalty Podcast. I'm your host, Dov Baron. I'm here to assist you tapping into the one thing in your business that changes everything by transforming meaning into action. Curious to know more? Simply go to dovbaron.com. That's DOVBARON.com. You know, it's easy to look out at the division between political parties that's kind of crept into our own dining tables and become this contagious virus that's turned us all into political zombies wanting to eat each other's brains. And while all that's going on, people are falling through the cracks. Homelessness, that was something we used to think of as being for the real down and outs, is now on every major city corner. These are people who not always who are criminals or drug addicts. They are often people who just fell through the cracks of modern society. They don't want to be there, but that's where they find themselves. And then there's the gangs. In every person in a gang is there for a reason. Not everyone in there is there because they're a psychopathic criminal, or despite what you've seen on TV in the movies. Is it possible that, like the homeless, that many of these people are people who've just fallen through the cracks of this neo-capitalistic system we all live in? The major difference between the gang members often and the homeless is that they've applied an entrepreneurial spirit to their survival. So what happens if we decide to see these people through new eyes, through the eyes of being entrepreneurial, of being resilient, and most of all, being just like you or I, people who needed a tribe, who needed to belong, and gangs was a way for them to find that? What might happen if we gave them a tribe where they could actually belong, could use their entrepreneurial skills, and they could serve others? Would we see transformation in the individual, in the culture? Well, that's the road we're going down. So strap yourself in. As always, we need your help in staying relevant. So please get yourself over to wherever it is you tune into the podcast. Do us a favor, just rate, review, and subscribe to the show. Share the show with everybody you know. Let's be generous. Let's not hoard our information. If you are a regular listener, big thank you to you for making us the #1 podcast for globally for Fortune 500 listeners. And we, of course, are grateful and honored to be cited by Inc.com as the #1 podcast to make you a better leader. All right, let's just dive right in here. We walk around with our eyes focused on these tiny little screens when the panoramic 360 three-dimensional world goes by. We tell ourselves that we're well informed and we're well in touch because the media, whether it's traditional or otherwise, ram partisan focused news into our brains. All this, and yet we miss what's going on under our noses. We miss noticing that our children, our marriages, our families, our friends are all drifting away. We don't even notice that our humanity is drifting away. We are driven by the neo-capitalist machine, and we are falling when we are actually failing the poor and often forgotten members of our own society. What can we do? Can we actually make a difference when we have positions of power? Well, according to our guest, we can. In fact, he is the living, breathing, walking, talking example of it. Our guest for the next 2 episodes is Thomas Vozzo. Thomas Vozzo left a very lucrative career in corporate America, convinced that there had to be a better way to define success. In 2012, Thomas became the first ever CEO for Homeboy Industries, the largest, most successful gang intervention rehabilitation for reentry program in the world. He's the author of The Homeboy Way, a radical approach to business and life. And now Tom sees his life and success through the prism of how he can help people who are on the margins of our society. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together and help us welcome the corporate homeboy himself, Thomas Vozzo. Hey, Thomas.
Thought that was a great introduction.
Welcome, homeboy. Good to have you here, mate. Thank you.
Well, good to hear, and a terrific setup to all the topics that we look forward to talking to you about.
Absolutely. So where we always like to start is, what's the origin story of what gives your life meaning? I mean, obviously you were on a very, what would appear to be a very different path, and you've changed over that. What's the origin story of what gives your life meaning? Not just for the books, but, you know, at that sort of soulful level.
Yeah, no, and I want to say, and it's really, I thought, you know, there's philosophers out there and psychoanalysts out there, you know, Carl Jung, where he talks about having the first half of your life and the second half of your life, or the first chapter of your life and the second chapter. And so in the first chapter, most of us live in that, where we work really hard. We know the rules of what society's about. And for me, as a business guy, you know, show me the business rules. I was going to work really hard and based my own ability, my own merit, I was going to be successful. And I became a corporate CEO. I led a $2 billion set of businesses. And I definitely believed in meritocracy and believed in that this concept of those who did well got ahead, and those who didn't kind of work hard and do well got left behind. And that's the way it was. And so I spent my life being in that first chapter.
Sure.
Really, my origin story, I guess I want to say, beyond, you know, spending, you know, first 50 years of my life in that first chapter, was what I then came to experience when I showed up at Homeboy Industries. And we'll tell you about how I got there in a little bit later. But essentially, what I came to see in those first few weeks and months at Homeboy Industries was the struggle of the poor and the forgotten people of our society. So what I saw was, here are men and women coming out of the prison system. They want to leave gang life behind, but there's so many things stacked up against them. To do it the right way, there's so much stacked up against them. And then, you know, there's no special insight here. There's two Americas. There's the America that we all live in, the privileged America, and then the America of the forgotten. And the people live in that forgotten America have so many challenges. And so my origin story is, what gives my life meaning is, I want to be here. I want to fight on behalf of the people in that forgotten America. And I see at Homeboy how we help people. And I want to tell more people how to do what we do at Homeboy every day, so less people are forgotten and demonized, and the working poor can move further on up in our society.
So how did that specifically, though, how did that give your life meaning? That, you know, what was that moment for you? Was there a moment that you suddenly got, I got to change my path, or my brain or my heart or my soul is going in the wrong direction? Because oftentimes I find that moments of really true meaning for people are moments of profound awakening that is often embedded in pain, whether that's our own pain, or whether it's the pain that we collide with. Sure.
Well, definitely in the business world. So when I was still in the for-profit business world, I was a corporate executive. And this goes all the way back to 2008. And there's a 2008 recession. And in that recession, which is different from the pandemic recession we've had now, where it was a quick thing. 2008, the economy shrunk by 10 to 12%. And the businesses I were running, you know, so the corporation was Aramark, food services, uniform services. And so we sell and rent more uniforms based upon the number of employees that are out there in America, right? So when that shrinks, your business shrinks. And so Aramark had a very successful company. I loved my time at Aramark. So I love my time as a business person. I think well-run businesses are good for our society. But my struggle has always been is how do you balance shareholder needs and employee needs? And in 2008, when we had just gone from being a private company to a public company, and now we're trying to meet expectations of Wall Street, 2008 recession came along, and the businesses I was in charge of, it was $2 billion of sales, but $150 million of profit. And we were then projected to make $140 million of profit, not the 150. So missing by 10 million, which I thought was pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
Still made a lot of money. I remember getting a phone call from the chairman and him strongly telling me, you got to do better, Tom. We got to get back to our original projections because that's what the Wall Street analysts are expecting. And as he's telling me this, I'm thinking, wow, we've already done multiple rounds of workforce reductions that for me to get that last $10 million, I'm now affecting the lives of people who've dedicated their life for the company, who've worked really hard, who I know post-recession, we're going to need those people to keep us growing along the way. And so there's this thing about, I've always known, I'm not naive, but I always known that, look, there's a hierarchy, there's shareholder value, and then there's employees. But well-run companies keep those in balance. But at the time when you needed it to be in balance the most, we turned our back on those employees and laid them off. And I'm a good at business. I also know that making that last $10 million was not going to change the long-term value of our corporation.
No.
Only for bragging rights why we were doing that.
Right.
And so I saluted and I made it happen. Now I wasn't the head guys, right? So I sort of had to but in my mind, I'm saying something's got to change. There's got to be a better form in our capitalist society where employees are not that disposable. So that's what sort of put the seed in me to look for something different. And so a number of years later, we went private again, and I had a chance to then leave and go searching for something different in life, which I wasn't sure at the time what that was about, but it was like, how do I put my skills to use in a different way to help people? Because I've made all the accomplishments in the corporate world. And so a friend of mine invited me to lunch at the Homegirl Cafe, and we're in downtown Los Angeles. And I'm sitting there having lunch with my friend, and he's trying to get me involved at Homeboy to be a board member and all as a volunteer. And I'm having lunch, and I'm looking around and seeing the people who are serving us food and making the food in the back. And I see that they're engaged in their job. They're smiling with each other. They're engaging with the customers. I'm thinking that's a pretty good workforce. And I'm also realizing that back in my for-profit job, I would have never hired any of those people because not just because of the tattoos on their face, but because they were gang members, because they were felons. I just was not going to go hire those folks. And so for me, looking at it was like an awakening. It's like, what is it about this organization that in the context of a job, they're helping people dramatically change their life around? And so it kind of really fit for me right then. Is like, wow, the values I had as a business person can really be applied to helping people, the most marginalized folks in our society. And I sort of said, okay, sign me up. I want to get involved and see how I can help out.
Fantastic. So, what year was that you joined them?
2012.
2012. Mm-hmm. So, it's 11 years now as we record this. Mm-hmm. You've got, what is his name? Father, I'm sorry, I just had a blank.
Father Greg Boyle.
So Father Greg Boyle, he's the founder. But if you're in LA and you're sorting out gangs, my guess is there ain't too many whiteys involved. Right. And most of the people are not. What's it like for you to be this white boy CEO, corporate guy in this workplace where nearly all the people are people of color? And is it, I imagine, particularly today, because things are so, quote, woke, whatever the heck that means, there's the perception of the, quote, white savior. What's it like to be the white guy in that environment?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, there's a lot of issues in It's kind of loaded how you ask that question.
Yeah, of
And
course.
I'm going to give you a straight on set of answers. Let me just say, everybody who's listening, just sort of give me a little bit of grace if I say something inappropriate.
Please.
It's
I
not,
say inappropriate things all the time.
it's not meant that way.
Yours will be swept under the carpet compared to mine. Don't worry.
Right. Okay. Well, I want to say a few things on this point, and it's right on. And I want to say very strongly that I feel very welcomed into that organization. Right. People, listen, people who are truly poor and demonized in our society, it is such a struggle to be poor. They're not as worried about the wokeness of things as like the folks who are middle class and upper class who
Well,
have.
the thing is, they've got a hell of a lot more to be concerned about than
Right.
they're really worried about
For
that.
sure. Right now, does racism exist for poor people?
Of course.
Absolutely. Do they experience it their whole life? Absolutely. They know that's the score. They know things are stacked against them, right? But there's also so many challenges that we at Homeboy, we're helping them heal. First, we get over those challenges, but heal from the complex trauma they've experienced. Part of that complex trauma is racism, is institutional racism, without a doubt. And so, listen, there are too many struggles to be poor to be worrying about that. Hey, why is that white guy in here helping? So there's never really questioning as to what it's about. And so it's all about how we show up with authenticity to help people with tangible efforts and services, and really to be in relationship. So Father Greg's got this sort of philosophy of, and asking all of us, let's move ourselves to be on the margin in relationship with people on the margins of our society and be in relationship. It's not about coming in and wagging your finger saying you should have done this more differently or you've made a bad choice, but it's about just being in a relationship. So it's about it that breaks down all sorts of races, because you can't demonize somebody in relationship with. And just even think about our Homeboy Bakery. We make artisan bread, and there's nothing better than having two guys from rival gangs standing shoulder to shoulder at that bread table, rolling dough and making biscuits, right? There's nothing better. It breaks it all down. And so for me coming in, like I had all that apprehension of, hey, I'm the white guy, I'm the corporate guy coming in.
Yeah.
Soon came to realize they don't care about any of that. They just, not that they wonder how I can help them, but it's like, hey, if you're part of this community, we're all in this together. And I want to say that with a lot of conviction, because that's the way really people deep down think, and that's the way we sort of got to break ourselves out of some of these other tropes that are out there about race.
Thank you so much for saying that, Thomas. I mean, I think that so much of what we have to wake up to is my tribe has got nothing to do with the color of my skin, my religious beliefs, or any of those things. My tribe is, who am I serving and how can I serve them?
Absolutely.
And if I've got white skin or green skin, it doesn't matter. What matters is that I see, or we see each other from a human place, and that we treat each other with humanity. And I think that's what I said in the intro, is that we're so pushed towards some bipartisan tribal bullshit that we often forget that we're missing that our humanity leaks away, and we start seeing people as different than us rather than what's the same or what's similar. So thank you for that. That's why I think it was an important question to ask you, because now I want to go to the other side of it, which is, you said you had apprehension. What was the shock for you in going in there? Like, was it a shock for you to realize that all that shit in your head didn't really exist?
Yeah, it took me a long time to figure that out. There's a couple of things that were a shock to me. Is listen, it's just that your prior question. Look, we're a very diverse organization. So less than 20% of our folks are Caucasian white, and so to be in a meeting where I'm the only white guy, it's just different, because all my 26 years of corporate experience was complete opposite.
Right.
But really, and I invite all listeners to come and visit us in Los Angeles. You'll walk through our doors and you'll see us, you'll feel the special place. There's energy, there's a vibe, there's an attitude of kindness and joy and kinship. And so people walk through and hugs happen right away. So here's this corporate guy where you're never supposed to hug and touch somebody, giving hugs. And it's like everybody would come up and give me a hug. And I would kind of like stand aside. I wouldn't know how to hug people because it was like, I was like, oh, no, don't do it. But look, it's about people, it's about relationships, and there's hugs and there's laughter, not sarcastic laughter, but
No.
just kindness and self-deprecating and a twinkle in one's eye. And they because it's about healing is about being a relationship, positive relationship with people. So there's laughter and there's tears and all that. And so the other thing is for my own spirituality. So to me, I was born a Catholic, went to church, believed in God. But it wasn't until I showed up at Homeboy that I actually really understood God better. And then it put me on a spiritual journey that gave me more an awakening. So there's in part the answer to your question is understanding that because Homeboy, we feel like we're soaked in spirituality. People transfer in life because they find their own goodness, and they find their own goodness realizing God loves them. And when they know God loves them, they can love themselves and thereby start helping themselves, right? And that's why our secret sauce is about kinship, non-judgment, and love. And we're the only place in their life for many of these people that they've ever received that. And so that's what not just draws them in, but it's what keeps them coming back and to have them work on themselves. So in a bit, I want to talk more about some of the anger I see because the struggles of the poor, but you talk about the really radical change is understanding you can run an organization based upon love, kinship, and compassion.
Yeah, and again, so everybody's clear here, this is a not-for-profit organization that does 30 million a year. Now, they spend 30 million and they make 30 million. So this is not a non-profit that, getting government handouts all over the place and, are squandering the funds. Like most of our cities are, living on, massive amounts of money and spending it all, but it's mostly squandered. You guys have to operate like a business, and having a guy who was a high profile, top of the corporate ladder guy running the things means that, even though there's the love and the caring, that's still the business.
That's right.
And I think that's an important thing for our listeners to understand. So I want to get into the more corporate side of it, and I want to get into the changes we have to make. But first of all, I just want to go into the people who are part of this organization, because like you said, you walk into the cafe and you see people with tattoos on their faces. And, one of the things that we so often fail to recognize is that 70 million Americans, that's about 1 in 3 adults, have a criminal record. And much as you said, when you were in the corporate world, you wouldn't have hired these people. And we recently had an episode we did with Gil Winch, who started CY, which is an organization that was completely built on the disabled. And then he transferred that into not just the disabled, but also people with felony records, and found that there's this massive pool of incredible resources and people who are available that we automatically just dismiss. How do these people, do they just come into Homeboy, or do they transfer out into the bigger corporate world? And how can you guide the potential CEOs or C-suite individuals who are listening or watching and going, maybe we should look at that?
Yeah, I think about this often back to my business mind and for-profit guy. If I put my for-profit hat on, it's like I often think, wow, I wish there was a competition where I can, we have the same business model. I can choose my employees. You choose your own employees, and let's see who competes and does better. And I know if I'm going to take the Homeboy folks, I'm going to beat you,
right,
every time, because I see it. Listen, what we have. Back to our cafe, we have a Zagat rated cafe in Homegrown Cafe. It's only 7 other restaurants with as high as a rating, and it's fully run by felons and gang members, right? And so I see, for the last decade, I've seen how our folks, They have the ability to be really good workers. They have the intuitive sense. They'd have never given a chance before. And so what Homeboy does is help people stabilize in their life coming out of the prison system. People voluntarily come to Homeboy. They're not court mandated. They come to us because they want to change their life. We help them through the healing. And really, someone needs to be resilient enough to go out and take on a job outside society. And so, listen, we help around 8,000 people a year. We don't employ them all ourselves. Once they're through our program, we get them jobs outside of Homeboy. And so I'm a vocal supporter of let's hire people who have backgrounds.
Mm-hmm.
But I also want to be really clear about it. Right? Like I want people to hire the working poor. I want to be clear. You have to sort of give them, you have to invest into that population for them to be successful in your business. Let me tell you.
What does that mean?
Yeah, let me tell you a story. So as part of, at Homeboy, I had a secretary, an executive assistant, right? And so like all those type of functional jobs, we bring our clients and put them in those jobs. So there was a homegirl, her name was Joanna. Joanna went to youth camp, which means youth prison, as a young person multiple times. Yeah. She came out of camp, youth prison, and joined Homeboy looking to change her life. She's a single mother, lives in shelters with her young daughter. And so while she was with our program, we put her into my executive assistant role. She flourished in it. She cared for the job. She wanted to do better. She saw that was her path to go out and get a job elsewhere to take care of her and her daughter, right? To finally afford some type of small apartment and live forward. So she was very dedicated to the job. So like any nonprofit, we have a board of advisors and we meet quarterly. Well, Joanna would make sure she got to we had 7:30 in the morning meetings. Joanna would make sure she showed up at our location at 6:30. Chairs were set up, make sure the water was down, the paper was in place. So she cared about her job, what you would want out of any employee, right? And yet, so there was one time right before we had a board meeting, the night before, at 4:00 that night, before, she gets a call from her parole officer. And a parole officer says, you need to report into the office tomorrow to fill out some paperwork. And Joanna says, okay, can I come in the afternoon? Because I have to come in early because set up for my job, to set up for this board meeting. Parole officer says, no. If you don't show up at 8 a.m., I'm going to violate you, which means you go back into jail and you lose your freedom. And so, of course, we said, Joanna, go to your parole officer.
Of course.
But how many employers would have said go? Or how many employers would have been open to hearing whether she actually has to go to a parole meeting? But when you give someone that freedom, that latitude to do that, they're a very loyal employee. They care because they want to do well for their job. And so my point is that if you're in the corporate world and have all these strict rules and you worry about setting precedent, versus worrying about what each individual needs, you're going to not do well here. But if you think about the individual and what support service you need to provide, that's not that costly. It's just sort of giving them sort of a little bit more latitude. You're going to have a great group of employees.
Yeah. And the bottom line, there's a lot of talk about loyalty. This show is called Leadership and Loyalty. And often I think people just don't understand what loyalty is. They think, well, you need people to be more loyal. Well, are you loyal to them is my question all the time.
Right.
What you were loyal to Joanna. And so she, of course, was loyal to you. But the question wasn't, well, is she loyal to us? The question is, how can we be loyal to her? And, it's not, well, tit for tat. It's like we have to be loyal to these people we serve. And so often, not just in, with the people you're talking about, but in the workforce, like you talked about in your corporate job, where it's cut some more people to make that 10 million people who are dedicated their lives. Well, you're not loyal to them.
That's right.
You're now loyal to Wall Street as opposed to loyal to the people who have served you. And I talked about this in post 2008 when I said, listen, there was a great awakening by people where they realized, oh, these companies I thought gave a shit don't give a shit about me. And I'm going to do whatever I can to make some money and do okay because I cannot rely on them anymore. And then people start saying, oh, people are so disloyal. Well, you were never loyal to them. And we're seeing that with the pandemic. We're seeing that now with the recession, 80,000 jobs laid off here, 12,000 laid off there. And I'm like, you don't have to be genius to work out recessions don't last. They have a period of time and they come back. And you're cutting away your best people. And then you're going to expect them to come back with open heart. Oh, thank you for having me back. We talked about the white.
No, you're so right. Even if your best people you don't cut, they see what's happening to the other people, so they understand this aspect. Well, loyalty is a one-way street, and it affects them long term.
Yeah, so we don't matter. Listen, we're already coming towards the end of part one of the show. This is a very important conversation I think we're having here, and I really appreciate it. And I want to get into the nuts and bolts of our society, how we're set up, how people end up forgotten, what we can do practically as business individuals to sort of bridge that gap and make a difference, and so maybe pulling some of those people out of the cracks, and really examining our own mindset. So I want to talk about all that in part two. Before we go to part two, would you do us a favor and please let our listeners know where they can find out about you, where they can find out about Homeboy, about your book, all those kinds of things?
Great. Thank you for that. So Homeboy Industries, we have a pretty vibrant social media following. We're on Facebook, Homeboy Industries, and homeboyindustries.org is our website. The book is called The Homeboy Way, where I tell the stories I learned. I wrote the book thinking if I was to go back into the for-profit world, what lessons would I take in the nonprofit world, learning from homies and gang members? And that's what's in the book. And there's a lot of individual stories in there about the people I came into relationship with and what lessons are for life and for business.
Thank you. That's really great. We will make sure, of course, that all those are posted, all those links are posted in the show notes. So if you didn't catch them, it's okay. They're in the show notes. Go there. You'll find them all. We'll make sure that they're all posted for you. Listen, we're going to be back in just one click with Thomas Vozzo. He is the CEO of Homeboy and Homeboy Industries. We're going to dive deeper into this conversation about these forgotten members of our society and how you, as a corporate leader, can tap into these people and really serve not only your organization, but society in general. And that maybe we need to rethink how we're coming at things. We're going to be back in just one click. So stay curious, my friends. Stay curious.